So I have absolutely no idea why the Bears supposedly sold about 60,000 tickets yesterday for that preseason game. But I can also tell you this much. When I looked at the stats on ESPN, only about 54% of the stadium was full, which was kind of disappointing because I didn't go to the game, so I probably shouldn't be saying much. But at the same time, it was the Justin Fields debut game, not week one of the preseason. It was the Justin Fields debut game. But what's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd Koshul here. You can follow me on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Usayd Koshul. Usually I have Max Smith in the house. He's my co-host for this whole thing, but I have no idea where Max is. I'm pretty sure he's in California this week. So we have one of our newest members on, Joe Herff. You can follow him on Twitter at Joseph Herff NFL. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
I am doing good. Ready to break this thing down. I thought yesterday really what happened is let's just get it right into it, man, because Andy Dalton completely stunk it up. Now he only played like 7 or 8 snaps anyway, and it was going to be the Justin Fields show. And I know everyone's talking about how QB1 controversy, blah blah blah. I think there is going to be a controversy that develops, but I also think that yesterday a lot of it was just so scripted because Nagy did say earlier in the week, "Hey, listen, Justin's going to get a majority of the reps." So it wasn't like Justin earned all those reps yesterday. The Bears basically gave them to him. But what were your thoughts about the game yesterday?
Yeah, man. So I was there, and it was absolutely electric. Like you said, it was about half capacity. Did not feel like that at all. It felt like it was a full stadium. Like as soon as he took the field, the stadium absolutely erupted. Like it felt like I was at an actual game. Like it was unbelievable. And Andy Dalton, yeah, I agree. He looked very very meh. He looked like he had good command of the offense, but it just seemed like nobody was getting open. It seemed like it was kind of basic concepts they were running. And then as soon as Fields came in, it kind of looked like the same. And then the second half looked like they kind of opened up a bit more and kind of let them do what they're going to be doing, it seems like, in the season.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is this, and you can tell Fields is building chemistry with these guys quickly, but Fields' performance stuck out to me yesterday because I noted this on Twitter as well. I was just like, you talk about just that second quarter alone, you saw the accuracy, the decision making, the mobility that was certainly on display, which, by the way, I mean, Fields' mobility, I think, is perhaps the most underrated aspect of his game. And then there were a couple times where ball placement was good. There's were a couple times where I'm like, okay, he's gonna have to put a bit more air on those throws. I think it was the Rodney Adams pass where
Mm-hmm.
he basically led Rodney Adams to the sideline. And I know Rodney Adams is a no-name guy on this roster, but the reality is that I think if it was like an Allen Robinson or a Darnell Mooney or even a Cole Kmet running that exact same route concept, that would have been a catch and it would have been a perfectly placed ball.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I mean, yeah, he's dealing with these like third string, fourth string wide receivers and fourth string and all those backup linemen. I mean, I would like to see him a little more with Robinson, Mooney, Komet. I mean, Jesse James is probably the most decorated player that he played with, and I mean, he hasn't been as of much. I mean, he kind of has bounced around lately, but he is a solid tight end. But outside of that, I mean, he's dealing with undrafted free agents and like Chris Lacey, John Villa Johnson, and as you're saying, Rodney Adams. So I think yeah, once he gets with those experienced receivers, we're going to see a lot different things from him.
Yeah, see that offensive line surprisingly, because you brought the O line up. I mean, it actually surprised me yesterday because they were playing with a makeshift offensive line, and everyone I think was just blowing everything out of proportion in regards to the offensive line in the sense that we don't have Tevin Jenkins, James Daniels is out, Jermaine Ifedi's out. No one knows what's going on with Tevin Jenkins, and you can tell it's worse than Matt Nagy's making it out to be because they signed Jason Peters right as soon as the game ended yesterday. But that offensive line, I mean, there are only 2 starters, which was Sam Mustipher and Cody Whitehair that were starters last season. I mean, hey, they allowed 0 sacks and pretty much held their own down. And that speaks to one, the players are actually pretty decent, even if it's just depth. But number 2, I think the bigger thing that it speaks to is the ability of Juan Castillo, the offensive line coach, to get the most out of these players. Because we saw the same thing last season, like when James Daniels went down, Alex Barr stepped in and looked pretty good. And then as soon as they took Rashard Coward out, it was like, okay, we actually have a pretty decent offensive line here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think a big part of what happened with the offensive line yesterday is the fact that every time Fields went to throw, he was kind of moving around, and that's what kind of made it seem like he wasn't getting pressured a lot. So when he was like doing all those play action boots and all those like designed plays of him going outside the pocket, it made the offensive line better, and that's kind of what we've been asking for from Nagy. I mean, don't like talking about it, but that's kind of what we've been asking for since Mr. Trubisky was here. Was just more of that. And to see that with Justin Fields is perfect because as soon as he gets outside the pocket and he starts moving, the offensive line has a lot more time to hold on to their blocks, and it gives him a lot more time to throw, and it gives him the ability to use his legs as well if nobody's open. So, I mean, it's about time we finally are starting to see that more.
Yeah, see, I felt like it was. I mean, I felt like the mobile quarterback was definitely there these last 3, 4 seasons. It's just the major difference was that Mitch didn't have and it was very evident yesterday. And I hate knocking on Mitch because, like, I've closed the door on that completely. But I know the Boo Birds are going to be in full effect next Saturday when the Bills are at Soldier Field. But I'm going to say this. What it comes down to is this: is that Mitch always had the mobility, but like he just couldn't operate within the pocket. Whereas yesterday, from the very start, you could seriously tell that what Justin was doing is he was just moving in and out of the pocket. And I'll be one to say this. I mean, watching nearly every game of Justin's for 2 years at Ohio State and then seeing yesterday, I could look at it very easily and say, okay, even Justin's probably not going 100% here, and he's playing a bit more conservative than he would like to. And I think it was probably because the coaching staff was like, hey, you're going to get out there, you're going to make mistakes, but don't make too many mistakes. Just hold it back because this is essentially just a audition for something bigger.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree with that. Like he seemed like he was a lot more. He didn't really take the shots he takes at Ohio State. Like he took shots downfield basically multiple times a game. I think he probably had. I mean, outside of the obvious Jesse James wide open throw, I think he had one shot downfield, and that was to Rodney Adams. And the one that Rodney Adams made the really nice catch over the first round corner that was on him. But I mean, outside of that, he really wasn't taking the shots that was normal. And I think it was because they were like, okay, we want you to, instead of taking those shots, we want you to read the field more. We want to show, we want you to show us that you can go through your progressions and that you can read this defense like we want you to do correctly. And he did. And like you said, he was incredible in the pocket. Like in the pocket, he'd sit there, he'd take his time, and as soon as he felt any pressure, he got out of that pocket well and was safe with it. He'd go for the run. He would, I like the play that comes to mind is the one where he rolled out to his right and he baited the defender and then just shoveled it forward to whoever the wide receiver was wide open because he baited the defender forward. He's just got a great idea of feeling the pocket, feeling pressure coming towards him, and just getting rid of the ball. And he showed it yesterday.
Yeah, and you know what else showed it yesterday? I think was the defense. Now, I was a bit wary of the defense because, I mean, obviously I've been to camp a couple times, and my immediate takeaway was, hey, listen, the reality of the situation is that this defense, they know that people wrote them off. Yeah, they look older than they actually are on paper, but I think there's a youth movement occurring because we saw yesterday. I mean, okay, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Akeem Hicks, all the standard guys that are pretty much the faces of this defense. Well, they played only a couple games, or I'm sorry, a couple snaps basically is what they played. But what really stuck out to me was the depth on the defensive side of the ball. And you're talking guys like Charles Snowden, who had, I think, a tackle for a loss, or 2 tackles for a loss, and I think like 1 sack. So Charles Snowden stuck out. And then I thought that the cornerbacks is still the most unproven positional group on this roster, but I thought Duke Shelley and Kendall Wilder really held their own down. And I've said this all offseason, when your 2 most experienced corners are Desmond Trufant and Artie Burns, you have a problem. But I'm going to say this is that I think if Wilder keeps this up, there's a serious case for Desmond Trufant not even being on the opening day roster, because the reality of the situation is that Kendall Wilder looked a lot better than people were expecting him to.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with the way the corners played. I mean, specifically Duke Shelley, like you were saying, he showed great ability in the slot. I mean, I heard a lot of people talking pretty bad about him early on, saying that he was getting beat, but his ability to play the press out of the slot yesterday was very impressive. And he was aggressive, physical. It's just something you want a slot receiver. You need somebody there who, I mean, yeah, he's a little small, but he does not play like he is his height. He plays like he's as big as Jalen Johnson, and he's a big physical corner. He presses at the line. He showed great technique. He looked like a veteran out there. I mean, I was surprised he put as much as he did because he was playing so well. And we saw a lot of depth. I mean, Snowden came in on his first snap, he made a sack. We saw great depth on the D line. We saw Tonga look awesome. I want to see that dude play more and more. He looked great. We saw inside linebacker Caleb Johnson from Houston Baptist University. He looked absolutely awesome and aggressive and physical. A few tackles for losses and just flies through the line of scrimmage. Like you were saying, the depth is incredible. And it is concerning we don't have veterans at corner outside of Burns and Trufant, but I'm totally fine right now with Vildor and Johnson.
Yeah, look, Tonga, I think, had his biggest play yesterday was down near the goal line where he actually penetrated the gap, which then allowed Alec Ogletree to get into the backfield, which we'll get to Ogletree's performance in just a moment here. But Tonga playing the way he did yesterday, I think, is significant because, and I just wrote this in one of my columns on Fireside Bears, by the way, where I was like, look, do we really need to be, after watching Kyrus Tonga yesterday, do we really need to quit panicking so much about nose tackle Eddie Goldman and him being out of football for basically 20 months at this point? Because again, the last time Goldman suited up was week 17, 2019. And we're sitting here in August and it's been basically 20 months. Now, I'm not saying, Tonga's going to come in and replace Goldman right away. But hey, what Tonga showed yesterday does kind of ease any of the tension that I had on my mind about what that defensive tackle spot could look like. Speaking of these defensive tackles, I mean, I thought Mike Pennell, the veteran, he was another player that stuck out yesterday. And then just sticking along the defensive line, I mean, when the Bears lost Brent Urban and Roy Robertson Harris, I was like, okay, that's a big hit you're taking. And then you factor that in with losing Jay Rogers, who was responsible for the development of so many of these guys, and factor in, okay, Akeem Hicks is now a year older. Look, Angelo Blackson, Mario Edwards Jr., even Sam Kamara, the undrafted free agent from Stony Brook, who the team is trying to make an outside linebacker because of his quick feet. Those guys all had pretty notable moments yesterday. And so my point, I think, is just that everyone was kind of writing this Bears defense off and saying, yeah, well, they're old. It's a core that really doesn't have much left in the tank. But hey, listen, and I understand it's only preseason. That's totally valid. But for live action reps, they played the defense played so much better than a lot of people expected them to. And moving forward, I mean, it's going to be intriguing to see how, as we head into week 3 or week 4 of training camp at this point, like, what is Charles Snowden going to do? What about Sam Kamara? How about a guy like Laquille London? Because these young guys are going to form the foundation of this defense for the next 2 to 3 seasons.
Yeah, you make a really good point about that youth. I mean, and specifically, that really scared me too was losing Jay Rogers, because like you were saying, like we kind of credited Jay Rogers for the development of guys like Bilal Nichols and getting the best years of his career out of like Akeem Hicks, and we just had so many great defensive linemen through him, and it is credited to him. Like nothing against him still at this point, but Ryan Pace still finds ways to find cheap talent at the defensive line and keep that depth incredible. I mean, like you were saying, just it looked like everybody knew what they were doing. Like it's gonna be really hard come camp cuts to see who gets cut. Like I did like a lot of those guys, like Blackson, Kamara. Like you're saying, he's trying to get moved outside linebacker. I thought he looked great at defensive end. I thought he looked really good. Like it's gonna be really hard to see who gets cut and who gets added to the practice squad because we only have so many spots.
Yeah, well, what were your general impressions of the defense yesterday? Because my biggest takeaway was that this entire unit is looking, outside of the young guys, I mean, this entire unit is just looking so much faster and more aggressive compared to anything that we saw the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like it's going to be hard to see like the full picture because we didn't get to see Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan. I'm still a little concerned about Trevathan. I would like to see him a little bit in the preseason just to see what his speed's looking like after last year. He was looking a little slow. He did pick it up at the end of the year, but he was looking slow for the most part. And if we do have an issue there, we have great depth. We got Christian Jones and we got Alec Ogletree now. So I'm not too concerned, but that's the only kind of spot I'm really concerned about right now. Like corner again is young, and that still is a little scary, but to have veteran depth behind that, Duke Shelley in the slot, that front seven though, outside of Trevathan is just going to be unstoppable. Even if anybody gets tired, you can rotate somebody in who is going to be good.
Yeah, see, Alec Ogletree, I think, comes in as perfect insurance for Danny Trevathan because and I felt like it just wasn't exclusive to Danny Trevathan to start the year last year. I just thought that a lot of the older players across the league seemingly started slower simply because there really wasn't an offseason. I mean, and the offseason was done via Zoom, and then training camp was just so limited in what teams were able to do in terms of working out. But I also, when you look at the whole thing, when Trevathan, you have good insurance policy with him simply because Alec Ogletree, I mean, Alec Ogletree took over the game yesterday. And for a guy who pretty much signed like a week and a half into camp and then had 6 interceptions, he did really well. And again, he only started, I think, 1 game for the New York Jets last season. So with Ogletree, he's always been a highly productive player. He's never really been a household middle linebacker, but as a rotational guy, after seeing the way he played yesterday, I would definitely take him because there's some speed that's there, but he's really instinctive, is what I should say.
Yeah, he looked good. Like you could say he kind of got burned on that route by Kasicki, to kind of start the game on that first drive. But I would put that more in on a great route of Gesicki. If you rewatch the play, like you see Gesicki kind of flattening out his route, and then absolutely just make a great break and kind of a little bit of a push off, like when it's not worthy of a flag, but just a very good route that he got separation, and it was wide, and it was absolutely perfect ball by Tua that no defender can get to. And after that, he looked lights out. Like again, like that goal line stop he had where he flew through the line, set up by Tonga. And he having that depth along with Christian Jones is going to be very, very good insurance for Danny Trevathan if he isn't the same guy that we saw back in 2018, 2019. If he's looking like 2020 Trevathan, he's going to have to absolutely just zone in because these guys are good.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of guys that are good, there's a couple guys that are not so good, and I'm gonna come out and say it. I mean, I pretty much trashed Ryan Nall, and then he broke off like that 29-yard run. I also early impressions are this. I know it's gonna be about 2 weeks until we actually see the roster get finalized, but I would say this much. I mean, I don't see Joel Iyiegbuniwe making this team. I also think that when you look at this running back room, I mean, Khalil Herbert looked really good yesterday. He averaged like 7 yards a carry almost, or just about 6.5, so right around that clip, but I think Khalil Herbert and Damian Williams are going to push Ryan Nall off this roster. And then Javon Wims needs to go absolutely bye-bye because Javon's been here. I get, yeah, he's been good on special teams. But I also think that it gets to a point where you stop keeping guys around on the roster just because they're good special teams players. And instead, what you do is you bring in players that are going to be legitimate competition for the guys that aren't on special teams, because you know that those guys that you're just bringing in for competition, the wide receivers like the 6 or the 7 or the 8, what you're doing with that is basically giving them free reps on special teams so they can prove themselves.
Yeah, that running back room is very, very deep as well. Like we were just talking about how deep the linebacker depth and D-line depth is now. Like that running back depth's gonna be tough because Ryan Nall, yeah, he's out of here now, which kind of sucks because again, he's nothing crazy, but he's been an absolute grinder on special teams and he works his tail off. Like you love to see guys like that. It's just he's just not a very good running back. And to see guys like Artavis Pierce, he had a great game as well. He broke up that really long run as well. I want to say it was like a 40-yard run. And he looked good as well, but he's probably going to be on the practice squad because we got guys like Damian Williams, Khalil Herbert looked great. Tariq Cohen will be coming back eventually, and David Montgomery. I mean, you're not going to carry 5 running backs. And at wide receiver, yeah, Wims, he needs to get out of here. And I think who should replace him is Rodney Adams with how good he looked. And if you want, I guarantee if you put Rodney Adams on special teams, I'm sure he'll do just as well as Wims. I mean, they say like Wims is like a great special teamer. You don't see him as like a standout. Like I don't see him making a ton of tackles. Like it was always Patterson. Like he was kind of the main guy that you'd see on special teams making plays on whether it was returning or on like punt or on kickoff. Like it was mainly him. I didn't see Wims do a whole lot of great work. So I would definitely like to see Rodney Adams make the team over him. And I mean, again, wide receiver is gonna make a lot of tough cuts though too.
See, my whole thing is this, and I've said this on our YouTube channel. I've said it on our weekly podcast too, but the Bears are always an organization where they make a move a year too early or they make a move a year too late. And I think in this case, you kind of held on to Wims a year too late because if he doesn't make this team come September, what you basically will have done is wasted the entire offseason on reps that could have been given to, like, let's just say an undrafted free agent or just another young player out there, even a veteran that has a little bit left in the tank. And when Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy talk all the time about competition, yeah, there is competition, but looking at this wide receiver room, I mean, your first four are already locked, and it's just going to be a matter of who do you decide to carry after that, because Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, we know are making the roster. Marquise Goodwin's making the roster because he's wide receiver 3. Damiere Byrd's pretty much solidified a spot. And then after that, it's going to be, okay, do you carry 6 or 7 wide receivers? And I would say that right now, probably Rodney Adams, as well as John Vea Johnson or Riley Ridley are the ones that are earning that final roster spot for the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I'm with you on Rodney Adams being the 5th guy, but then I think for sure, I think Ridley's a near lock as well. I'd say he's like not guaranteed. I think he's kind of like Bird, where he's like not guaranteed, but I feel like he's solidified a spot. He's looked really good at camp. He hasn't done a whole lot wrong, like nothing bad. He's had, I mean, I think I want to say he had a drop yesterday, but it wasn't anything crazy. Like it was like just a good defense on him as well. But he hasn't had a lot of drops in camp. He's done very well. He's gotten bigger. I mean, I think he's looked very well, and he definitely everybody deserves to make it over Wims. So as long as Wims is gone, I don't care who the 5th and 6th guys are, honestly.
Yeah, that's going to be a key thing to keep an eye on. Anyways, so that's going to do it for this one. We'll be back later in the week when hopefully Max is back and we're able to talk about Mitch Trubisky coming to town. It's weird because the last time, I'm not even joking, that I remember a Bears quarterback or a former Bears quarterback getting booed in a preseason game was when Jay Cutler returned to Denver in 2009 following the trade. 4 months later, went back to Denver. That's the only time I remember like seeing a quarterback get booed in a preseason game. But hey, listen, guys, before we get out of here, follow me on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Usayd Koshul. Follow Fireside Bears, guys, on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Check out our weekly podcast because episodes for that drop Wednesdays at midnight. And you can follow Joe on Twitter at Joseph Herff NFL. He's going to be a part of our weekly show moving forward. So had a couple changes there, but yeah, bear down, guys. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.